Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 174. As always, my name is Dr. David Noe. There's a C in the middle there. I'm not sure what it stands for. But I'm down here in the vomitorium. This would be the bunker now. It used to be a nuclear fallout shelter, Winkle.
It did? Back in the day when they were all the kids were told to duck and cover?
Yeah, the Cold War,
yeah.
Right? So we're surrounded by thick concrete walls. You can see this steel I-beam above us right here.
Yeah.
We could just keep podcasting right through the apocalypse if we need to.
That's amazing. So I think back in the day, if like Brezhnev had lobbed one this way, you would have been fine?
Yuri Andropov,
yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah.
I think we'd have been okay.
Fantastic.
So I'm doing well. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I am on my quote-unquote spring break.
Why did you put the scare quotes in there?
Because it's February.
Okay.
And it's still a little chilly outside, but I always drive my wife crazy.
Okay.
When I'm on break because it's
a Milli Vanilli kind of thing.
Milli Vanilli?
Yeah, you drive her crazy. Oh no, that's wrong.
You're talking Fine Young Cannibals.
Sorry.
We could talk about Milli Vanilli later.
Okay.
But no, I would. Actually, this morning I went into the office.
Oh, really?
And my wife's going to come to a day, and I'm going to tell her I was in the office, and she's going to roll her eyes and say, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
And I understand that. But
you went to the office because you just couldn't handle the freedom and independence and lack of structure in your own home?
That's part of it.
Okay.
I get very restless, and I like my work.
Oh.
And frankly, I'm sick of apologizing for that.
And
yes,
the ratio 4 is at your office. It's a little too early for the ad.
Yes, maybe that's why I went in.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's why I went in, because I find great comfort and stability in the
ritual
presence of the ratio 4. Yes.
Did you make a cup?
Of course I made a cup.
Okay.
Right? It's a part of the ritual, right?
Yeah. In fact, before we forget, you can't leave here today without me handing over to you a little aftermarket feature that goes great with the ratio 4.
Fantastic.
Something that Mark himself recommended.
I look forward to it. All right. And so how are you doing, Dave?
Well, I'm doing well, but got a little story to tell here.
Okay, please.
And so there was one day this past week. This is all made up, but just bear with me. One day this past week, I didn't have time to use the ratio to make my coffee, right? So I stopped somewhere at the Bargo Barn and Brewery or something.
Yeah.
And I got my cup of coffee, and I'm driving along, right, during this brief window where we will still drive our own vehicles. And the coffee was so bad.
Oh, no.
It was bitter.
Yeah.
Dreggy.
Ugh.
Little things falling down through the suspension to the bottom of the cup.
Oh, this is horrible.
Yeah, sledgy. Yeah. And it tasted terrible. And I'm driving along, and you can probably see where this is going. I'm so distracted by the terrible taste of this coffee.
Yeah.
The bitterness, that I start to lose track of my surroundings a little bit. And I'm pulling up to one of those railroad crossings.
Yeah.
And it's, a little bit dangerous, right? Because I don't see what's going on.
Right, you got to be aware. Right?
Yeah, and the coffee is so terrible, acrid.
Yeah.
And right at the last moment, I hear the train coming by, and I slam on the brakes.
Yeah.
And the coffee goes flying everywhere, and I hit my head on the steering wheel.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was really, really awful. And the moral of the story here is that if I had just... Because I hit my head really hard. There was like a thud, a big heavy sound.
Yes, yeah.
Or a crash or something. And the moral of the story is, if I had just used the ratio, I wouldn't suffer that trackish bang.
Oh. Trackish bang.
Come on. I worked hard on that.
Yes, you did.
A trackish bang?
Yeah, man. I nicely done.
Okay.
I like the payoff.
Okay. I mean, you had to wait for it, but I mean, it's okay.
Yeah, no, that was good. That had almost a Norm Macdonald
really?
flavor to it.
Wow.
It's kind of like stringing you along. And
so I'd be in good company there.
You drop the hammer.
I suppose. So Jeff, where's Peter Sarris? The Justinian expert. Where is Peter Sarris?
He's missing in action. Mm-hmm. I still hope to conduct this interview with him.
These things happen in the annals of podcasting.
Yeah.
The eager guests report with excitement and a kind of breathless awe that they're going to interview a really well-known and excellent scholar, and then there's just something that goes wrong in the scheduling and so forth.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can reschedule that.
Right.
Over the last couple of weeks, I've been reading his book.
Yes.
And I've also, have you ever listened to, I hate to mention another podcast.
You're going to mention it. I know you're going to go, it's going to be Tom Holland, right?
It's The Rest is History.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is a podcast.
On principle, Winkle.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to it. So
really?
There.
It's very good.
Okay.
Right. And so, and I was listening to their episodes on Justinian.
Oh, I didn't know they did that.
And several times throughout these episodes, they brought up Mr. Saris and praised him to the skies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, hopefully we'll still get a chance to talk to him. It's in progress, but these things happen sometimes.
Yeah.
Reminds me of when we got to talk to the great Ross King.
That was one of my favorite episodes.
That's right.
Yep.
His book on Botticelli, Little Barrels, that should be hitting pretty soon, I hope.
And once it hits, we got to drop him another
Absolutely.
note. Get him back on the show.
That's right. But what are we talking about today?
We're talking about the Milkman today.
What?
The Milkman.
The Milkman.
Yes, otherwise known, or better known as Lactantius.
Lactantius.
Right.
Fascinating. So this is Lucius Caecilius Firmianus Lactantius.
Yes.
The guy who was so great, he had four names. That's right.
Yep. And who is this guy, Dave? Why should we care?
Yeah, so we're going to get into that, but I just have to say, Jeff, at the beginning that I'm going to need quite a bit of help on this episode. We're going to have to do this together, right?
Okay.
Because, of course, it's Lactantius, not Lactanti-me.
Oh, man. Okay, I think now you're pushing it. I mean, I was okay with Trackish Bang.
Am I pushing it? Okay, well, Lactantius is an individual who has held my interest for a very long time.
Yeah.
And, we'll give you the typical rundown vis-a-vis Wikipedia, just what you can crib. We'll talk a little bit about the broader bibliography of Lactantius, which is remarkably small. Mm-hmm. For as much as the guy produced, the interest he has generated has not been that high.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to say about us someday. These guys produced a lot,
but
the
man,
interest was low.
Low, exactly.
Yeah. So he was born around 250, of North African descent, almost certainly. But we'll get into somewhat the controversy surrounding his name, the Firmianus part, because there's a little bit of a mystery there. And then he lived through the persecutions of Diocletian, the last great persecutions. Somewhere along the way, he underwent a conversion to Christianity, and he ended up being the tutor to Constantine's son, Crispus.
Yes.
And he wrote quite a large number of really fascinating, high-quality works of Latin literature.
Indeed, and a number of things that have been lost, right? I think
That's right.
One of the things that I found fascinating about him is that he had this pre-Christian period.
That's right.
Where he had he wrote a number of poems. In fact, a poem about his travels from Africa to Asia.
Yeah, the Hodoi Poricum.
Yeah, and as always, it's a bit heartbreaking that these things don't survive.
Yes.
But he has this literary career that kind of bridge the two sides of his faith life.
That's right.
Yeah,
that is fascinating, and you can smell a kind of an opportunity there.
Yeah,
you know that there are these mashups, right? Mm-hmm. Apparently, the Sensibility and Zombies. You haven't heard this?
I haven't heard about this mashup.
It's a Jane Austen mashup. It's Sense and Sensibility and Zombies, or Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I don't remember. Apparently, it's quite good.
That sounds hilarious.
Where you take something, that has that certain kind of je ne sais quoi, and you combine it with something very incongruous.
Right.
So here's a chance, Winkle, for you to fill in the gap. Mm-hmm. Imagine yourself in the person of Lactantius. What would he have written in his travels from North Africa to Asia?
Well, I think my sense is that probably as a younger man and kind of a learned man, he probably wanted to kind of throw his hat in the ring in terms of in a Virgilian or Homeric kind of way, right? Or it reminds me of also like Cicero writing the epic poem about his consulship.
That's right.
Right, and so he wanted to kind of make a mark for himself, and I think probably kind of cast himself in an epic pose.
No doubt about that. Yeah. What is the traditional dig on Cicero? Oh, happy date for the Roman state, happy fate for the Roman state, the date of my first consulate. Right. Making fun of his poetry.
Well, and we'll talk about that. Lactantius is often remembered
that's right.
through the lens of Cicero.
And that's what drew me to him, and that's what's kept me interested in him, actually. Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But I think, Winkle, you've got the opening quote here.
I do. You went through the work of putting this together. Who is this from?
So this is from a guy named Blakeney.
Okay.
And this is one of the few recent publications on Lactantius. that you can actually get your hands on. And it's out of print, but 1950, E.H. Blakeney. And this is his epitome of the divine institutes. Now, the interesting story about the epitome, the synopsis, is that his most famous work, The Divine Institutes, 7 books, well received. But there was this fellow, Pentadius, who said, you know what, Lactantius? It's a good read, but it's way too long. Could you cut it down? Give us the Reader's Digest version?
Yeah.
Which I guess the kids say is the TLDR. Do you know that?
I do. Too long didn't read.
That's correct.
Right.
It took me a while to figure out what that was.
Tilder.
Toddler. What's that? Anyway, so E.H. Blakeney in 1950 published with SPCK the Latin text of the Epitome with an accompanying translation and some notes.
Yeah.
So it's really quite interesting.
Yes, I will happily read this. But before we do, I'm curious about and correct me if I'm misquoting you from earlier. You're talking about how Lactantius has not he's written these important works, but has not gotten a lot of attention. And so when you talk about this work being the most recent work of Lactantius, we have to go back 70, 80 years to get there?
Well, I wouldn't say it's the most recent. Yeah. I would say it's one of the more recent significant works. There are translations of his works. Sister Mary Frances MacDonald published a translation of the Institutes through I think it's the Catholic University Press. I'm going to pick up a copy of that, and a translation of his minor works, all in Latin. Yeah. So those are significant. There's a number of journal articles that you and I dug up, and some of which we're going to talk about. Right. He survives in the Ante-Nicene Fathers in the 19th century translation. Okay. But he just hasn't got the same kind of attention as some of the other men of that era.
That's really interesting. I'm curious to kind of see where this goes, because just off the top of my head, it seems like that lack of attention is undeserved. He seems like such an important kind of bridge guy between, say, Tertullian and Augustine.
You're exactly right. That's my reading of it, so far as my knowledge extends. But what does Blakeney say?
Blakeney says, the epoch during which Lactantius lived and taught is forever memorable in the annals of civilization. The birth of this eloquent scholar, somewhere about the year AD 250, coincided with Decian persecutions. He witnessed the last and fiercest of persecutions in the reign of Diocletian, and he lived to see published the famous Edict of the Emperor Constantine, which secured toleration for the Christians after more than 2 centuries of bitter conflict against the church and the forces of paganism arrayed against it. The once persecuted community, now established in the empire as a religio licita, was destined in the course of history to adopt a persecuting policy, never contemplated at that time of liberation, towards the paganism that had harassed it for so long a period. Quote, thus the whirligig of time brings in his revenges.
Yeah, isn't that a nice line? The whirligig of time.
Nice.
Right. So I think that Blakeney lays it out here pretty nicely, right? Mm-hmm. And so the least we can say about Lactantius, and we're going to say a lot more, is that he's significant because of the time through which he lived. Yeah. And so he, and then a contemporary of his, Eusebius, the historian, I think he was originally from Pamphylia, but then he was a bishop of Caesarea. So that's, I think, how he's remembered. These two guys cataloged the history of the time. Right. And those who came after, there were a number of other historians, they talked about the same things, but this is as close as we get to an eyewitness.
Yeah, exactly right. And to compare the two, to compare Lactantius and Eusebius, my sense is Eusebius is much better remembered.
Oh, sure.
Right. He's gotten, probably if I had to guess, if people were vaguely or partially familiar with this time period, they'd probably be more likely to recognize the name Eusebius than Lactantius.
That's right.
So let's give this guy his due.
Let's give him his due.
All right. Yeah.
So the whirligig of time brings in his revenges.
Yes.
So one of the first exposures that I had to Lactantius was actually as an undergrad at that institution where, we both undergraded. Yes. And then overgraded? I don't know what
we did lots of overgradding there.
the term would be.
Too much.
Yeah. But I was put in mind of this quote. I was taught this quote by the Florentine Platonist, Pico della Mirandola, right? And with a name like Pico, how could you go wrong?
Exactly right. It makes me think of Pico de Gallo.
That's right.
Is a tasty side dish.
And so Pico says this, and we're going to quote from Brill's Companion to the Reception of Cicero. Okay. I did not know this book existed. See the depth of my ignorance? I'm a Ciceronian guy.
Yeah.
Brill's Companion to the Reception of Cicero came out in 2015.
Okay.
That's exactly the kind of book I'd like to own.
Well, you should get it then.
But the problem is I looked at the cost.
It's from Brill?
You don't want to know.
I just see the word Brill. I say, forget it.
Yeah.
I know how much it's going to be. Right.
Yeah, so this is from chapter 3, a very interesting chapter written by someone named Gabor Kendefi. And the title of the chapter is Lactantius as Christian Cicero, Cicero as shadow-like instructor. That's a good title, don't you think?
I'm curious to what he means by that. But
yeah.
let's dig into. Are you going to dig into some Latin here?
Yes, I am.
Let's do it.
Right. So here is the quote that Kendefi gives from Pico. And it goes like this. De studio divinae atque humanae philosophiae. Quis apud nos non videat esse Ciceronem sed Christianum, hoc est aliquem qui eum ad lineam unguem expresserit. Quis enim non advertit lactantium Firmianum aequasse ipsum et forte praecaluisse in eloquendo.
All right, so a couple of questions there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you want to give us a translation?
Sure. So this is just kind of off the cuff here. So I'm not going to say this is, polished or anything. So he says, on the topic of the study of divine and human philosophy in section 7, who among us does not see that Cicero, but a Christian one, that is, someone who has presented him or expressed him right down to a T, right, to the line and to the fine print. Because we got this word here, unguem, which is a fingernail.
Yeah.
So this is kind of how you express it in Latin, to be the spit and image.
Oh, okay.
So you got them right down to the fingernails, right?
Right.
Because if you've seen those wonderful AI images
of,
I don't know anything. You ask AI, make me an image of Winkle podcasting.
Oh, please don't do this.
They'd get a lot of it right, but you'd have 8 fingers, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You'd have 7 or 8 toes, just on one foot, or on one ear. So the Latin expression for representing someone to a T is to get them down to the fingernail.
Down to the fingernail.
Yeah, ad unguem. And then the rest of it is, for who has not noticed, says Pico, that Firmianus Lactantius has equaled him, meaning Cicero, and maybe even surpassed him in eloquence.
Wow. That's incredibly high praise.
That's incredible praise from someone who really knows how to judge such things.
No, so what's the date of Pico?
For Pico, 1480s.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I don't know his exact date of death. I'd have to look it up. I think he died in the late 1480s, early 1490s as a young man. But he's hanging around Florence, right? Being patronized by Lorenzo the Magnificent.
Yeah.
He's translating Plato into Latin. The guy is a prodigy.
Yeah.
And he surveys the landscape and he says, this guy Lactantius, aequasse ipsum equals Cicero, maybe even goes one better.
That is incredibly high praise, right? This Pico guy, some podcast should do an episode on him or a few. It wouldn't be a good idea. Don't you think that's a good idea?
I think so. It's probably already been done, but
yeah,
that's not going to stop us.
No, exactly.
We're going to do it anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what got me interested in Lactantius, the Christian Cicero. That's kind of an alluring title. It's an interesting idea.
So you stumbled across this quote back when you were an undergrad?
Somewhere at Calvin College when I was just shuffling around as an undergrad in my old, worn out flannel cut off and my long haired ways. You know how it goes.
Carrying your belongings in a pillowcase?
That's correct. Yes. The pillowcase came later. Let it go, Winkle.
So no, I'm just curious. So I'm wondering, was your interest in Cicero already there, and then that's what kind of led you to Lactantius?
It was growing, but at the time Cicero was just a name. Okay. I didn't really have any deep knowledge, and I still have a lot to learn. But I know a lot more about him than I did as an undergrad, obviously.
Right.
And the second thing that played into this is that there was a professor in our department there at Calvin. Now, I'm sure he retired before you came on the scene. This would be William Radius.
Yeah, he was gone by the time I got there.
Yes,
yeah.
So he was gone by the time I got there too. And I believe that William Radius was married to the daughter of a famous theologian, Gerhardus Voss.
Is that right?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
That, I'm pretty sure that's correct. So William Radius published another book on Lactantius, which is selections from his Divine Institutes. And Jeff, could you tell us a little bit about that? Because this is part of what feeds into our interest.
Sure. So this book came out in 1954, published by Erdmans. I'm holding in my hands right now your, apparently this was a used copy that you picked up way back in the day.
That's correct. They were giving them away in the Calvin Classics department.
Is that right? Yeah, and I can see your undergrady notes all over it.
Did I scribble all over it?
It looks like, I mean, it could, maybe it was whoever bought it, who had it before you.
It's probably I.
Yeah. But yeah, this is a selections, Lactantius selections from his Divino Institutiones, with introduction, commentary, and vocabulary. Just flipping through this book, it's my favorite kind of these kinds of books. It's very straightforward, short introduction, clear Latin text. You got copious notes, and then a dictionary in the back.
That's right.
So very user friendly.
Yes, there are so many of those. This is a great untapped resource. I don't know if our listeners who teach Latin or who study Latin, if they know about all of these.
Yeah.
I have another similar one, which is on Tacitus, his Agricola. Now, that one's by Oxford, but it's a handy, tight little volume. You got the text, copious notes, so you don't get stuck. I can't figure out this sentence.
Yes.
Here's the vocabulary. Here's what you need. Keep going.
Right. Yeah.
So there's the actual hope that you'll get to the end of it and be able to say, I read this thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, part of me, as my cranky old man, wants to say they just don't make them like this anymore, right? But I thought let me read a little bit from Radius's introduction here.
Yeah, so this is William T. Radius, right? Now deceased, former professor of classics at Calvin.
Yep. He writes, little is known with certainty of the life of the philosophic and highly cultured defender of the Christian faith, Lucius Caecilius Firmianus Lactantius. He was born in Africa of heathen parents.
Yeah, old-fashioned.
Right. Probably about 250 AD. Nothing is known of his youth except that, according to St. Jerome, he was a pupil of Arnobius. He was teaching rhetoric at Sicca in Africa when, in 292, he received an appointment from Diocletian to be professor of rhetoric at Nicomedia in Bithynia. The emperor, who owed his revelation to the Roman troops on the Asiatic side of the Bosporus, was developing Nicomedia as the capital of the eastern half of the realm, aspiring, as we may believe, to render it superior to Rome. He presumably chose Lactantius for his outstanding merit in his profession. However, since the town was entirely Greek, he could find few pupils to instruct in Latin rhetoric, and as a consequence turned to writing. It is generally supposed that it was during this period of his life that he was converted to Christianity. Under what circumstances, we do not know.
Yeah.
So this is fascinating. So we already talked a little bit about how Lactantius lived at this incredibly revolutionary time.
Right.
Living through Christian persecutions, moving from paganism to Christianity, but he's also living through this time period where the dramatic move from the west to the east.
That's right.
And so everything is moving. Rome is now decentered.
Correct.
Right, and things are moving towards what we would call Turkey and what eventually what will become Constantinople.
That's right.
And so he's all a part of that wave as well.
Yeah. So within his lifetime, Constantine, or shortly after his life, Constantine moves the capital east and rechristens it Nova Roma, right? So the time of Constantine's elevation in 306, he had never visited Rome, nor did he visit Rome for several years thereafter.
Yeah.
You have the Roman emperor declared in York, England.
That's right.
Have you ever been to York?
I have not.
The peppermint patties are great. Now, I've been through York, but apparently it's this great medieval city. I haven't tarried in York, as it turns out.
I would love to see it.
Yeah.
Another thing too that maybe our listeners might be wondering about, and something that's always kind of fascinated me too, is what's with all these North Africans?
Right.
So
I got asked this recently, but go ahead.
Yeah. So we have, this is particularly in that the 2nd century and 3rd century, we have figures like the non-Christian author Apuleius, my guy. Well, this is where Tertullian is from.
That's correct.
This is where Minucius Felix is from.
Yes, Minucius Felix Octavius.
Lactantius himself is born there.
Don't forget his instructor, Arnobius of Sicca.
Arnobius, and
such a dry place,
right, exactly.
Sicca.
Right. He had to use a lot of lotion.
That's right.
And then, of course, eventually Augustine.
Correct.
Right. So I think
go ahead.
Yeah, our listeners probably wonder, well, why is this such a mecca of intellectualism and literature and philosophy and religion?
Interesting word choice there.
What's that?
To call it a mecca.
Oh,
because it was, of course, the advent of Islam and its incredibly rapid and successful expansion that brought an end to the church in North Africa.
Indeed, right.
But prior to that, I don't think anyone has a real clear answer to this. If some listener out there has greater, and this wouldn't be a high bar, has greater expertise in this than we do, they can point us in the direction of some work which tries to answer the question, what is the source of oratorical brilliance in supra-Saharan Africa in this time period?
Yeah. I mean, my sense has always been is, and this is a very, very penciled in answer, is that it kind of that North Africa, or what we would call Tunisia,
right?
That area in some ways is experiencing a ripple effect from Alexandria.
Well, I think that explains part of it, because you do have Clement of Alexandria along about 220, 230, right. The teacher of Origen, but Clement's writing in Greek, and Alexandria and Cyrene, right, which is west of there, they have a tremendous Hellenic culture. But from there west, it's all Latin.
It's all Latin, right? So all of those authors we just named,
right?
They write in Latin.
Yeah. Now they may have known some Greek. It's not clear,
right?
I mean, it's hard to imagine Lactantius living in the region of Byzantium and not knowing any Greek.
True.
But none of their Greek works, and I guess the title of the travelogue that's lost, the Hodopericum, is a Greek title.
Right. Oh yeah. Good point.
But still, I guess the best explanation I've ever heard, and this is really in the context of what Peter Brown says in his biography of Augustine, is that there was just a long tradition of rhetorical excellence in that part of Africa. I guess you've been there, actually.
I have.
You've been to Tatooine.
And Carthage.
I have not, but I guess in antiquity there was about a 100-mile wide strip of land from the Mediterranean stretching up onto the plateau, which was incredibly fertile. And I don't know if that exists anymore. My understanding is that it doesn't. But all along that strip that lined the Mediterranean, this was the breadbasket for Rome itself.
Yes.
And so you had these enormous barges that were transferring between Alexandria and Carthage, first to Sicily and then going up to the Bay of Naples, and finally delivering grain to the hungry Roman population.
Yes.
And so I guess you had a bureaucratic class coming down from Italy and demanding that their sons get the best kind of oratorical training.
No, I think that's very true. One of my my most potent memories of the time I spent in Tunisia is being taken to a number of these subterranean granaries.
Right.
And they're kind of massive, like Egyptian in their scale, where the grain would be stored, and then, as you say, shipped out quickly in times of desperation and famine.
Right.
And I also get the sense from Apuleius's works outside of the Metamorphoses is that the way that he talks about Carthage is Carthage was a very sophisticated and wealthy place. For all the talk that of the Romans defeating Carthage, burning it to the ground, and salting the earth, it reemerged as
pretty quickly.
I mean, it was such a strategic and wealthy, a perfect place to do business.
That's correct.
That probably that too was also a draw for a lot of people. But
no doubt.
But
the natural harbor, it's kind of the central pinch point in the Mediterranean between Sicily and Africa, the African coast.
Exactly right. And again, also correct me if I'm wrong, but Felix, Tertullian, Lactantius, Augustine, these are not immigrants.
No,
they're probably Punic or Berber. They are from that area.
Exactly. Right. With the possible exception of Lactantius, which we should get to in a moment.
We don't really know.
We don't.
Okay.
But yeah, they were Berber, the people that invented carpet.
Yeah, kind of scratchy.
No. Yeah, so these were not Italians. And I guess this is another point that our listeners may already know. But when we talk about the Roman Empire after the 1st century AD, we're not really talking about Italy so much anymore.
That's very true.
Because you have Spanish emperors. It becomes really an international kind of project. So as mentioned before, Constantine doesn't even visit Rome.
Right.
Before he becomes emperor, and even for a few years after.
And Diocletian comes from this very low class family and just kind of works his way up through the army.
That's correct.
So by the time we get to the end of the 3rd century, it's whoever can kind of wield the most military power.
That's right.
Is the one who's going to be stabbing the
That's
current
right.
emperor in the back.
That's right. So in the time of Martial, the poet Martial, the end of the 1st century AD, right? He still represents that kind of aristocratic snobbery.
Yeah.
He's complaining about the Spaniards in his epigrams, remember, whose teeth are so white because they brush their teeth with urine.
With urine.
Exactly. But 100 years later, right? There's or a little more than 100 years later, there's an Arabian emperor, and there are Spanish emperors. They're coming from all over.
Right.
It's not the Roman Empire is not an Italian project anymore.
No, not
which
at
is
all.
Shocking to people.
Where's Constantine from?
So his father was from Moesia, from the Dalmatia region, Illyria.
Okay.
So Central Eastern Europe.
There we go. Yeah, right.
His mother, according to, this is very interesting to me, but we're getting a little far afield, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Constantine's mother, Helena Augusta, Ambrose tells us was a stabularia, which is a waitress.
Huh.
Which is not a very, it's not a very complimentary thing to say at the time. At least. I got nothing against waitresses.
No.
They're fine, but this just means that she was not a high-class woman. And there's some suggestion, and Evelyn Waugh wrote a novel about this, but there is some suggestion that Constantius Chlorus, Constantine's father, met Helena Augusta in some British pub or something like that.
Yeah.
Married the woman, and Constantine was born, and she went on to establish several important churches and became a saint in the East.
Right. So all of this is to say we're getting a long ways away in Roman history from having to kind of establish a connection to a Julio or Claudian bloodline or anything like that.
A Cornelius, a Metellus.
Yes.
We're a long way from that.
It's gone.
Can you imagine Cicero or Tacitus or one of these guys, how they would have responded to the knowledge that, Seneca was of Spanish descent, but his family, I think, had lived in Italy for at least one generation, if memory serves.
Yeah.
And he was kind of an outlier anyway.
Right.
They would have been a little bit horrified.
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me. I think we have whiffs of this even when we talk about American presidents.
Oh, sure.
And I was thinking about Jimmy Carter, who recently passed away at age 100. And when he came up, he was the peanut farmer.
Yes.
Right. And much was made of kind of his humble origins. He was not a Washington blue blood. Right?
No,
he was not a senator, and
he wasn't in the Skull and Bones Club, at Yale, which I think both of the Bushes belonged to.
Exactly, right.
Were you a Skull and Bones guy?
I didn't. I still have no idea what exactly that is.
I don't know
either.
either.
Secret society, right?
At Calvin back in the day, it was a Jello and lettuce guy. Remember?
Oh, I was deep in the Jello and lettuce.
Do you remember that? The dining hall dessert that they used to feed us.
Yes.
Right. I don't know if this is I think we have some Dutch listeners. I'm going to alienate them. But for dessert, there'd be a plate.
Yes.
And there'd be a piece of lettuce on which was a cube of Jello.
Yes.
And inside the cube of Jello was suspended a single grape.
So exactly right.
Do you remember that?
Levitating there.
Exactly.
Defying gravity.
I don't know if this was a metaphysical lesson or something.
All I know is that in all my time as an undergrad, I never touched that plate.
You never touched it?
Nobody did. I think it was the same Jello and lettuce that was there for 4 years.
It was like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle of Jello. There's just one electron, one piece of Jello constantly orbiting.
Oh man, yes,
that's fascinating.
So how did we get there?
I have no idea. We're so lost.
That might have been some kind of connection to some secret society that.
The Skull and Bones Society, the Skull and Bones. Jimmy Carter being an exemplum of how it is that. The Roman Empire was no longer an Italian project.
Right, exactly.
So I have a little reference here, and this is from the famous German scholar of the Christian faith, Christian history, Harnack. Okay. And this is from his Chronologie des Alten Christentum, something like that. How's your German, Jeff?
Terrible.
Okay, yep. That's close. This is so it's Ancient Christian Literature, Book 2, and it is page 416. So in this volume, Harnack tells us of an inscription that survives near Carthage at the city of Cirta, which is in modern-day Numidia. Do you remember visiting that spot?
I do not. Actually, I looked this up on the map. I do not think we got it.
You didn't get there? No, you spent most of your time in Mos Eisley?
Mos Eisley, exactly right. I tried to get a transport out of there.
Yeah, but you couldn't.
No, we couldn't.
You couldn't, yeah.
Right.
True story, and I think you've told it on the show before of how you visited Tatooine when you went to Tunisia.
Yes, stayed in the motel where some of those shots with Uncle Owen and Luke were.
Oh yeah,
came in the early part of the first Star Wars film. Yeah.
Right. Something that's almost as important as Star Wars lore is that there was an inscription found there in Cirta, Numidia, and the inscription mentions by name Lucius Caecilius Firmianus Lactantius.
I love this kind of stuff.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So this is literal hard
That's right.
proof that he existed and that he was from this place.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So Ken, Brad, and I were in Thessaloniki one time, and we were looking at the excavations that were taking place in the subway tunnel.
Yeah.
Because they're excavating, Roman mosaics, Greek remains, and so forth.
Right.
And in my youthful foolishness, which, still going strong, I said something to Ken along the lines of, I think that it's really only literature which can best preserve history, because the living want to compete for space. You can't just say, you can't have people live here because there's archaeological ruins. And, with his typical wisdom, he says, well, I don't know. Look at how old those stones are, right? This is going to outlast any literature, probably. And so he had me there as usual.
Well, man, you can't beat Ken.
No,
Right.
no. So the name Lucius Caecilius, that's a standard Roman name. The Firmianus part is a little bit controversial because there is a place in Italy called Firmum, and Firmum is north of it's north of Ancona. So if you imagine the Italian peninsula, right? And on the east coast, there's a part that has a harbor. It's the elbow, you might say. And so the Greek word for elbow is Ancone, and right there is the city of Ancona. North of Ancona is Firmum, and Firmum was where the Eastern Fleet took on its, the Eastern Roman fleet of the Navy took on its supplies of fresh water.
Oh, okay.
And so because of the Firmum part, some people have thought Lactantius was Italian. Because Firmianus, Firmum, I think most scholars now believe that's a misidentification, and they take him as purely 100% North African.
Okay. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, interesting speculation, but I mean, what else can you really secure?
Not much.
Right.
Not much. So the more likely explanation is that he was a Punic or Berber. And there's also a mosaic that survives from North Africa, which has what might be a picture of Lactantius.
Yeah.
And he looks very Berber.
Right.
He's darker complected. He has a kind of a dark, interesting eyes. He's got long hair. It's a lovely mosaic.
That's the one that is the other suggestion for identification of that is Apuleius. Right?
Really?
Yes.
So you've studied this at much greater length than I have. What do you think? Is it Lactantius or is it Apuleius?
It could be either. It could be neither. I think that the connection, the depiction of the person, that, as you say, the complexion and the eyes,
right,
suggests that this is some notable Berber or some notable North African, and it comes down to one of those two. But there's no inscription. There's it's one of those things where you pick your favorite.
It will remain a mystery.
Yes.
Well, my favorite is Lactantius.
Yeah.
Yours is
It's probably Apuleius, right? We'll have to leave it at that.
Right. So we should talk about the Punics and the Berbers for just a minute. The Punics are the Poini of Carthage, right?
Yes.
And these are Semitic peoples who originally came from the region of Tyre in Sidon, Phoenicia.
It's the same word.
That's
right?
correct.
It's Phoenicia, right? Yeah.
And so the legend of Dido, right?
Yeah.
From the Aeneid, or Alyssa, sailing west and settling the coast of North Africa, is based on historical fact.
Yeah,
And so the Punics who lived there, who were the sworn enemies of the Romans in 3 wars, they were very closely related to the inhabitants of Palestine,
right,
to the Poini. And so a lot of the Roman prejudice and hostility to Carthage as a commercial center, it's very, very old and survives in the attitude towards some of these orators as well.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
But I don't know much about the Berbers. Do you?
I don't either. I kind of what ethnically or culturally really distinguishes those two. But
Well, there was a Barbary lion. Are you familiar with that?
No.
There was a North African lion that was smaller than the lion in sub-Saharan Africa, and it was a little bit different in color. And I think this is the one that's usually described in the Greek texts, not the massive one that you'd see in some zoo in Uganda or something.
Right.
But one that lived above the Sahara and now is extinct. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Hunted to extinction.
Correct.
So would this be the same lion that we see like in the Pella mosaics?
Yes, I think so.
The lion hunt. Okay.
So that's a Barbary lion.
Interesting.
And the Barbary coast, right, is Tripoli and places like that.
Right. Yeah, just next door in what we call Algeria. Right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And speaking of lions,
yes,
it's time for the ads.
All right. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Hackett Publishing. We love these guys. They've been with us since the very beginning of our humble little podcast, coming up on, what are we at, 4.5 years?
Oh, it'll be 5 in August.
5 in August. And they took a chance on us. Dave dropped him a note, say, hey, would you be interested in supporting this fledgling attempt to keep the flame alive and to present the classics to a popular audience in a hopefully a fresh and interesting and funny kind of way? And they said, let's do it.
That's right.
And they're still with us. We love this company. They've got such an amazing selection of attractive, erudite, affordable books.
Right.
From the wide swath of the classics to kind of all different kind of quarters of academia.
Modern philosophy.
Yes. What else we got there?
The text on Descartes, his meditations.
Yeah.
They must. There must be hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of those going out the door every year, because almost every undergrad philosophy course, one of the final texts that they read is Descartes, because he's just so important, and their volume is excellent. It's perfect.
It's so impressive, right? So they are one of these a handful of companies that are out there keeping the flame alive.
That's right.
And doing it at a cost that is not going to kill your budget. My students, who don't often have a lot of money to scrape together, they always appreciate it when I order Hackett text for the class, because they know it's going to be very, very reasonable.
In addition, they have a great selection of works by Thomas Aquinas in translation by a fellow named Thomas Williams, who incidentally was on my dissertation advisory committee.
Is that right?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
He was a good scholar then, and I didn't know that he was going to become famous as a translator of Aquinas, but he has. And these texts are inexpensive, but they don't sacrifice quality.
They don't.
That's the amazing thing.
Yep. So do yourself a favor. Go to hackettpublishing.com. That's HACKETT publishing.com. Check out their wide selection. Find the books that you want. Drop them in the grocery cart. And if you add this coupon code, AN2025, that's AN as in Ad Nauseam plus the current year, Dave, that will get them two amazing things.
That's correct. It will get them 20% off, if I'm not mistaken, and they get to ride a mule down to the post office to collect their pillowcase of books.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
No.
It's
20% off their entire order,
and they will ship them to your door for free.
Check it out. This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by the good folks at Ratio Coffee. Mr. Mark Helweg is the inventor, the entrepreneur, who said, why can't we have good quality coffee at home? Does everything have to be mass produced?
Yeah.
Now, to Mark's credit, I don't think he indulges in such silly puns, but we do.
Yeah, exactly. But he saw a need.
That's
and
right.
He filled it.
That's right. He said we need to have a lovely, aesthetically excellent countertop automatic pour-over machine. So he went out and invented it.
He did. Right. So no longer do you have to go to the bagel barn.
That's correct. And brewery.
The brewery. And nor do you have to settle for the squirty plastic scorch pad.
That's correct. You don't need to use the Gurik with their marsupials.
No.
A little bit of Joey in every cup.
Nope.
You can get high quality pour over at home at a reasonable cost. Now, Jeff, tell us a little bit about your hodoi poricum, your journey with Ratio.
Yeah, so I started out with the Ratio 6, which I loved. The Ratio 6 is kind of your it's your mid-range machine in the Ratio catalog, which was fantastic. In the years since, I have graduated up to the Ratio 8, which is kind of their premier machine, which I absolutely love.
The Millennium Falcon, as your kids called it,
exactly right. Yeah, it's a great, beautiful, attractive, reliable machine. And then most recently, the new Ratio 4, which is a smaller machine, but with the removable tank, it fits perfectly in my office.
That's right.
And when I want that perfect cup of coffee before I head off to class, it's right there waiting for me.
No muss, no fuss. You push one button. There's no Kindle brick.
Nope.
Underneath, no scorch pad.
Right.
Nothing that bakes the coffee after it brews. I mean, whose idea was that? Let's keep the coffee warm by turning it into a kind of caramel sludge.
Exactly. Right.
I just can't see the wisdom behind that.
That's the kind of stuff that's going to distract you as you're trying to cross railroad tracks.
That's correct. Right. You're going to end up with what?
With trackish bang.
That's correct.
Right. But so the question, how do you keep it hot? Well, they have this hulking flagon.
That's correct.
Which is
a double-sided, double-walled, insulated thermos.
Keeps that coffee hot for
That's
hours.
for the Ratio 8, and it is incredible. So let's say you've gone to the refrigerator, right, and you've taken out a plate of huggable portions.
Yes.
You're ready to tear into some snacks, but you think a good cup of Joe, would go really nicely with this. What are you going to do?
Well, if you're completely at a loss, if your countertop is empty, what you want to do is go to ratio.com/ad nauseum.
Ratiocoffee.
Sorry, ratiocoffee.com/ad nauseum. Don't forget the V in that ad nauseum to take advantage of one of these wonderful deals so you can experience this coffee brewing in the comfort of your own home every single morning.
Yeah, and you're going to want to enter this coupon code then when you get to ratiocoffee.com/ad nauseum. The code is AN ratio, so ad nauseum ratio, RATIO 2025. Which is the current year, AN Ratio 2025, and you will receive $20 off a ratio machine at checkout.
So, check it out.
Exactly.
All right, Dave, as we get back into it, take us more through some of this this fairly thin but fascinating biography of Lactantius.
Yeah, no one's ever said that about me. Fairly thin but fascinating. So I'm going to read a little bit here from one of our frankly, my favorite commentator on Latin literature, which is Jean Biagio-Conte.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is the John Hopkins text as translated by Joseph Sadalo.
This is the text that when I first got to graduate school, one of my grandparents says, first he said, one, buy this book.
That's right.
And he said, read it and read it again.
Exactly. That's what I was told to. Buy this book. I mean, it's not sold by Hackett, so, buckle up.
You're right.
But
yeah, it's not cheap.
Read it and master it. Joseph Salado, I should say. So this is the little bit of discussion of Lactantius, page 641. 640. Although he was a pupil of Arnobius, so this is Arnobius of Sicca, another North African Rhetor, Lactantius, especially in his earlier and larger works, is a systematic and balanced thinker. Far removed from his teacher's excesses in both argumentation and style, traditionally compared to Cicero, so there's the Pico quote, Lactantius employs large, well-articulated periods, does not like phrases used for effect, and puts his trust in a reasoning that is engaging and calm. That's a lovely description, I would say, of the kind of style that I would like to develop.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
All steak, no sizzle. So
yeah.
Not the bombast, but whatever the opposite of bombast is, that's what I want.
Yeah, I think even Conte, he goes on to talk about how even in Lactantius' works where he's trying to persuade people over to the side of Christianity, and he's also talking about, well, this is the spiritual fallout. If you don't, he doesn't come with the fire and brimstone. I think he says he's more consoling.
That's right.
Than he is, shaking the fist.
Right. Yeah. So that's the open hand of persuasion.
Yes.
As opposed to, like you say, the fist of dialectic.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So at some point in his career, so remember he was born in 250. So some point in his career, maybe he's 45, so it's 295, something like that. He's appointed to the post of imperial Rhetor at Nicomedia, which is east and north, if I'm not mistaken, from Byzantium, Constantinople.
Yes.
Under the Emperor Diocletian. Now, the listener might be thinking, what's an imperial Rhetor? Well, this was in the time before a public media, right? This is in the time before newspapers, in the time before Twitter or X, anything like that. The dissemination of news and of imperial decrees relied upon certain individuals, right?
Yes.
So the person would have to get up in front of the entire population of the city and read the decision of the most recent decision of the emperor.
Right.
Here's what the emperor decided. Here is how you fill out your W-9. Here's how you're going to renew your license plate, whatever it was. And that person had to be not only a really engaging public speaker, but he had to have some knowledge of the law and be able to answer questions on his feet.
Yes.
And some of these questions would be quite hostile because people didn't always like imperial decisions.
Right. So maybe like the press secretary.
But yeah, I think it's close to that.
Being kind of bombarded by the various members of the press, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, this is a post that Augustine later held. He was the imperial Rhetor in Milan. And in academic terms, my understanding is that this is the pinnacle of an academic career. So I don't know what your aspirations are or were. I'm not in academia anymore, but not properly. I mean, I do some seminary stuff, but anyway, this would be like being the president of Stanford, maybe?
Yeah, I guess so.
Or being the chairman of the board of trustees at Harvard. I'm not sure what the what the exact equivalent would be.
But an incredibly prestigious position. And
highly coveted, very competitive. Everybody wants this kind of spot.
Indeed. And with a figure like Diocletian, who is probably best remembered for the persecution against the Christians, a brutal man who did not hesitate to use the sword, but he was also one of the great bureaucrats.
That's right.
Of kind of late antiquity,
no
right?
No doubt.
He reorganized.
Can you really put those two words together? Great and bureaucrat.
It felt strange coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, the rule of the drawer. That's what a bureau is.
Right. But right. So he completely reorganized.
You're right.
He kind of saw the writing on the wall. Things
for sure.
Things are moving east.
That's right.
This is too big to be handled by one person, and we need kind of a team of four.
A tetrarchy.
Right?
A Caesar and an Augustus in the west, and a Caesar and an Augustus in the east. I've always been so fascinated by this time period and the transition.
Yeah.
I know that your expertise rests with Apuleius, who's a little bit earlier, right? When did he die approximately?
Probably around 180.
180, okay. So right at the height of the Second Sophistic. So this is 100 years later or so.
Yep.
Another North African, right?
Indeed.
Apuleius.
Yep.
But I've always been fascinated by this transitional time in the West. And so Lactantius is appointed to the post of the imperial praetor.
Yes, right.
Then, of course, apparently thanks to Galerius, who was the lackey for Diocletian, the persecution breaks out against the Christians. And this is when Lactantius goes into hiding.
Right.
Now, this would make a fantastic novel or a series of movies, it seems to me.
Indeed.
Because you've got intrigue, you've got spying, persecution, you've got palace life. I think it's really quite interesting. So he goes into hiding, and then he comes out of hiding. So these are the bare bones of his biography. When Constantine comes to power, and then he is appointed to be the tutor of Constantine's son, Crispus.
So it's assumed that shortly before the persecution breakout, he has converted.
Yes.
Right. That would be
either right before the persecution or maybe even during the persecution. So one of the suggestive stories is that Lactantius was impressed by the courage of the Christians and said, well, maybe I need to kind of reconsider this.
Yeah.
I haven't been persuaded really of the truth of the Christian faith, but look at how these people are standing up under this, not all of them, but some of them under this incredible pressure.
Right.
And then he became a Christian.
Right. And this is broadly, geographically speaking, not far from the same groups of Christians that Pliny is when he writes his famous letter to Trajan, right?
Yeah, so that's in, I just happen to know this because I was looking at it recently. I'm not showing off, I don't think. This is in 111. Is the purported exchange between Pliny and Trajan. So 200 years before?
Yeah.
Just about 200 years?
Right. So there's been a Christian community there for
That's
quite some time.
Exactly. Good, excellent point. For 2 centuries and pressure on that community.
Right.
So then he comes out of hiding, and it's Jerome who tells us in his work On Famous Men, De Viris Illustribus, which is Jerome's attempt to, quick catalog the memory of all these guys before it's lost.
Yes.
He says that Lactantius was summoned to the court of Constantine, and the Latin phrase is in extrema senectute, which means when he's, got 1 foot in the grave.
Right.
Might be a good translation of that.
Right, yeah.
In extreme old age, to tutor Crispus. Now, what fascinates me about this is that apparently Constantine wanted to make Crispus into a philosopher king.
Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
So along the lines of Plato, right?
Yep.
And then you got Seneca, with Nero.
Oh, yeah.
If we could just get the heir to the throne when he's young and inculcate him with all these moral virtues and principles, maybe then we can have the kind of, the kind of government that will be just and noble.
Right. So, and you can also see what Constantine is thinking is, so Diocletian, setting up the tetrarchy, you have your emperors, but you have kind of a vice president.
That's right. The Caesar, you got the Augustus, who's the top guy, and the Caesar, who's the second guy.
And
titles only.
Right, exactly. But and certainly part of that thinking is that there might be some kind of a form of kind of natural succession.
Definitely.
Right? And so here too.
And they were even adopted.
Yes, exactly.
Legally adopted as a son, which is another... such a strange procedure compared to what we do today.
Yeah.
But go on.
But then Constantine, grooming his own son.
Correct.
For this, I think he's responding to that chaotic period in the latter part of the 3rd century where it's just one as they called him, the soldier emperor after another.
Right.
Right. And
yeah, something like that's a fascinating fact. In the 3rd century, I think that I don't know if it's Schaff or who it is that points this out, but there's a change in power every 18 months. And that's shocking.
Chaos. Yeah.
Almost every 18 months, there's a new emperor.
That's incredible.
So by the time you get to Diocletian, as you were saying earlier, he introduces this new feature of Roman sovereignty. He drops the title Principate, right, which is now 300 years old, right? Augustus developed the Principate because he can't say king.
Right.
And so he adopts the title of the Dominant. So it's very similar in all respects, but a different title. And he adopts the title Dominus et Deus, Lord and God.
Right.
And requires the subjects who approach Diocletian, requires them to crawl on their face, prostrate before they approach him. And, Lactantius makes a big deal out of this in his work on the deaths of the persecutors. And certainly there's some megalomania, right? Because is this how you conduct office hours, Jeff, at CC?
No, I was thinking along those lines, but I've often felt like
maybe that's going too far.
Well, intimidating to kind of crawl in front of other bureaucrats. I feel like when I go to the DMV, I often feel like that.
Yeah, but apparently, I mean, although it is megalomania, I think that Diocletian's purpose, as I read it, and you can read guys like Toynbee and Mamiliano are experts on this. I think his purpose was to safeguard his person. Right? There's been so much turnover.
Right.
That if I consider myself God on earth, maybe people will be less eager to assassinate me. Maybe I can last longer.
Makes sense to me. Like you talk about, change of command every 18 months. It'd be also interesting, like in all those years, how many of those emperors died a natural death?
Yeah, I don't have the number, but there
probably
was
almost none.
Yeah. There was a lot of execution. There was a lot of murder and so forth.
Yeah.
And of course, Lactantius describes the death of one of them in the De Mortibus Persecutorum, the deaths of the persecutors. The Emperor Valerian, who was skinned alive when he was caught by the Parthians.
Yes.
So Lactantius, can tell a ripping tale.
Yeah.
So anyway, like you were saying, Diocletian reforms the government. There's the Tetrarchy. Constantine calls Lactantius to come and tutor his son Crispus.
Yes.
Let's get this right. Yeah. So the most famous Christian intellectual he hires to be the tutor to his son Crispus. And it all takes place in Trier, which is in France, right? Which is one of the Western capitals.
Right.
So Lactantius is a long way from home now.
A long way from home. And a long way from really where the center of real power is, too.
That's true.
Yeah. But yeah, he's way on the edge of things, playing a kind of role like Aristotle to Alexander the Great.
That's
right?
correct. Yeah. Plato to Dionysius. And this is one of the things that interested me very much about Lactantius as well, is has this ever worked? Has the philosopher king motif, has it ever worked?
Right.
And I can't find an instance. It seemed to work for 5 years when Seneca was tutoring Nero along with Burrus. But as soon as Nero got a little bit of room, he apparently just ran wild, right?
Yeah.
And Seneca ended up taking his own life because of Nero's opposition.
Exactly. I think the one Roman emperor that in hindsight kind of is often thought could reach that ideal is Marcus Aurelius, right?
Right. I was thinking Richard Harris, right? From Gladiator.
Right. So maybe that is kind of a more kind of mythologized remembrance. But I mean, he left behind.
He was the philosopher king.
Yes.
I don't think he was. He must have had some great teacher, I suppose, but
he wasn't groomed to be the philosopher king.
Not so far as I know.
Right.
Or that part, maybe by his mother. That part at least has been lost.
Right.
But it didn't work in Lactantius' case either, because Constantine heard a rumor that his concubine, his common law wife Fausta, who was Crispus's mother, that she was conspiring against him, and so Constantine ordered them both executed.
Oh, brutal!
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it brings me right back to our episode on talking about like the royal dynasties in Macedon.
Oh yes,
right?
which is a few weeks ago.
Right, all of the intrigue
Olympius.
And murder and
yeah. So that kind of system, right? The luxury that those people live in, and the ease and the public adulation. I guess for some people that looks pretty appealing from the outside.
Yeah.
But I just can't imagine the dysfunction of being on the inside of it, where everybody is just so cruel.
Yeah, indeed.
Because the stakes are so high.
Yeah, I would love to do an episode one day talking about, to what degree was Constantine a Christian, and what did that mean?
That's
right?
very closely tied up in all this.
So he's remembered as the first Christian emperor, but
right.
He bloodied his hands.
That's right. Canonized by the East.
Yes.
So the Eastern Church elevated him to the status of saint, never canonized by the West.
Okay, yeah.
And so
right.
A deeply conflicted character, I would say, because he minted these coins. Now, listener, you're thinking, what does this have to do with Lactantius? Well, stick with us.
Yeah.
It does. He minted these coins. On one side is, a picture of the labarum, the symbol of Christ and his victory. And on the other side is the inscription Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun god.
Yes, indeed.
So there's a deep syncretism in Constantine's thinking. I'm going to, settle the Arian disputes. I'm going to bring everybody together. But I'm not really going to abandon, this is my read, all the aspects of traditional Roman religion.
Right. And I've also kind of heard the argument is that he wanted to settle the Arian dispute for more kind of political reasons.
Yeah, that's the standard.
Settle this so I don't have to bother with it.
Correct, because I must have peace among my citizenry.
Right.
So once Crispus and Fausta were put to death by Constantine, then Lactantius was out of a job.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And an old man.
That's right. He would have been, had he been born in 250, which is the most likely explanation, by the time of the Council of Nicaea in 325, which was right near Constantinople, Byzantium, he'd have been 75 years old.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what happened next.
So was he... do we know? Was he dead before the council?
We don't know.
We don't
know. It's quite likely he was at the council, but we don't know for sure. Now, one of the traditional criticisms of Lactantius is that he has a subordinationist view of the Holy Spirit. That is, he does not treat the Holy Spirit as consubstantial with the Father and the Son.
Oh, interesting.
And if you read the Divine Institutes, you won't get a strong Nicene understanding of the Trinity. Now, to me, this is an argument from silence. I mean, I have read a fair amount of Lactantius. I'm no expert. So someone out there is, we'd love to hear from you. But if you read the Divine Institutes, you will not get a strong Trinitarian understanding from Lactantius. I'm inclined to not draw an uncharitable conclusion from that because it was before Nicaea.
Yeah.
Right? It was before 325. The Divine Institutes were written between 303 and 311.
Okay, yeah.
And secondly, it's long before the Council of Constantinople in 381. And it's not really until 381 that the church ironed out her thinking on the Holy Spirit anyway.
Okay.
So there were many people between 325 and 381 who weren't sure what to think exactly about the Spirit. So not to get too deep into the weeds, but this was before Basil of Caesarea had written his work on the Holy Spirit. It was before Athanasius. It was before Gregory Nazianzus. So, I mean, if the guy wasn't as precise as you might like, is that really fair?
Right, exactly. It seems perfectly understandable that he, Lactantius himself, is wrestling and working these things out. Right?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's interesting that I don't think he ever presents himself as a theologian. So most of the sources that we were digging through in preparation, he's a layman, right?
Yeah.
He was not ordained as a priest. He did not have formal theological training. Would he be a popularizer, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, that's my sense of from what I read of his biography is that probably that pre-Christian career that he had.
Right.
He developed a deep love and understanding of classical culture, and he wanted that to be congruous with his new faith.
Yes, said.
A lot of that is of his work is trying to kind of connect the two.
Right. Well, we're coming right down to it, Jeff. And I think we have time for just a couple of more quick items before we bring this one into the garage and turn off the key. And what's the metaphor I'm looking for
Shut
here?
the door?
Shut the door?
Okay. I don't know.
You don't know where I'm going?
No, I don't know. Okay, yeah.
So here's just a brief list of his works. And in part 2, for sure part 2, maybe part 3, but definitely part 2, we'll get into some of the specifics of these works, sharing some of the Latin, some of the translation, and the content. He wrote De Opificio Dei, The Craftsmanship of God. So these are teleological arguments of how the human body shows God's handiwork. And then what's
an argument from design?
Exactly.
Okay.
Relying heavily on Cicero's De Natura Deorum, Nature of the Gods. And the second one on the list, Jeff, what do we have there?
We have De Mortibus Persecutorum, on the deaths of the persecutors.
That is, I think you'll really like that, because there's parts of that are really grisly.
It sounds gory.
It is gory.
I look forward to that.
It goes all the way back to Herod, and the idea is, hey, you stand up against the church, you're likely to get disemboweled, is basically the storyline.
Yeah.
Then the third one is the Divine Institutes, written between 303 and 311. 7 books, beautiful, beautiful Latinity.
And this is his masterwork?
That's right.
Okay.
This is the magnum opus.
Yep.
And then, as mentioned before, people complained, it's too long.
It's too long. Get to the point.
Yeah, give us the TLDR version. So he wrote the Epitome.
And that survives.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, in fact, you got it. It's the Blakeney text.
Oh, yeah. Right, you mentioned that. Yep.
That's correct. And we'll read some excerpts from it next week so that those who like Latin, which is hopefully everybody, will get a sense for just how beautiful it is.
Yep. And then we have De Ira Dei on Divine Wrath.
So this is an interesting one because... just in brief, Lactantius seems to depart from the traditional notion that God is immutable, that he can't suffer passions, that he doesn't suffer feelings. And so philosophically, I don't know, either Lactantius is kind of going astray or he's batting above his, what's the term I'm looking for?
Is he above his pay grade? Is that what you're going
punching
for?
above his weight.
Punching above his weight, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Trying for something in terms of... trying to bring in a real philosophical argument. Whether he succeeds, I'm not sure.
Okay, all right.
And then the last one?
Yeah. He has a poem on the phoenix.
That's right.
Right. And as I understand it, there's nothing like in the lines themselves that are explicitly Christian, but most people interpret like the rebirth of the phoenix is meant to be a metaphor for the resurrection.
Yes, it's a sly poem written in elegiac couplets. It's 150, 170 lines.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not clear when it was written. This is when we have to read excerpts from next week and talk about it a little bit more because it's fascinating. Harry Potter.
Yeah.
You familiar with Mr. Potter?
Right.
He has, I think, revived the story of the Phoenix. Isn't that creature in there?
Fawkes is Dumbledore's Phoenix, right? Named after Guy Fawkes.
Tell me more about this. I don't know this.
So Dumbledore, who's the main head wizard at Hogwarts.
It's a Richard Harris once again, right?
Yeah. Yes. So then it was played by two persons. Did Harris die?
Yes, he did.
Yes, and then he was replaced. But he has in his study Fawkes, the Phoenix.
Okay.
Who is, very kind of tongue-in-cheek, named after Guy Fawkes, the guy who was...
the gunpowder plot.
Who was hung for the gunpowder plot.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And who is burned in effigy on November 5th every year in England, right?
Those crazy Brits.
Yep. And so, so Fawkes every once in a while will burst into flames and then out comes a new Fawkes. But his tears are tremendously potent as a kind of a potion of healing.
Huh.
Right. So yes, the
great story.
It's a great story.
Every 1,000 years, doesn't the Phoenix die and get reborn?
Right. In Harry Potter, it's more often than that because we need it in the books.
Right.
Right. But yes, exactly. So I'm fascinated to see Lactantius' take on this myth in his poem. Right.
And as a kind of summary statement, maybe to set us up for next week, scholars say that Lactantius is the first sustained attempt to confront classical heritage from a Christian vantage point.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to that.
Right.
Yep. But Dave, we're up against it.
So why precisely, Jeff, is it that we need to get out of here? Is someone banging on the door?
Yeah, I heard them screaming earlier. Apparently, this is this group called Hyperspace.
What?
Yes, it's the official Star Wars fan club.
No, really?
Yeah, they've been after me for a while.
Have they? Why?
Right. Well, and whenever I talk about going to Tatooine and seeing some of the Star Wars sets out there,
right? Exactly.
Right. They find some of my comments flippant, dismissive. They thought
you're just a moisture farmer.
Exactly right. But I think I've had some pictures of myself taken sitting on the old sets there. They find that kind of sacrilegious.
Oh really?
Yeah. So
where you can read about this. No joke.
Yeah.
Wikipedia. It's no joke. It's true.
I have heard of that.
You can read about the Hyperspace, the official Star Wars fan club, on Wikipedia.
Yes. Right. Do they do any LARPing? Are you familiar with LARPing?
It's one of those internet terms that's floating in my brain.
Right.
Like TLDR.
Yeah.
And I look it up and then I forget it as soon as
immediately. Right.
I think it's live action role playing.
There you go.
Is that what it is? LARPing?
I'm guessing. So there's got to be some Star Wars LARPers out there.
Is that related to simping?
No, I don't think. I think the simping is more.
Do I want to know?
It has more to do with kind of romantic.
No thanks.
Yes, right.
Okay.
But yeah, LARPing is like cosplay, right? You dress up and then you reenact, and
right.
I'm guessing hyperspace does a lot of that.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they want to use our space.
They want to get in here.
Well, they want to get after me.
Okay,
and they want to use the space for some LARPing.
Well, we've got high quality audio. I mean,
true.
That could be. Maybe they want to compel Mishka, whom we need to thank now.
Yes.
They want to compel her to maybe produce one of their podcasts.
Yeah.
What would be a good name for a Star Wars podcast?
Oh man, it's hard to get
Death Story instead of Death Star.
Well, not bad. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to beat Wikipedia.
Wikipedia is pretty
bad.
good.
That's right. But I've had it with these guys, and I want to get out of here. I find them a little creepy.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. So thanks as always to Mishka.
That's right.
Hopefully she doesn't have to put up with these guys. But
thanks to Ken and Scott for giving us the bumper music.
Yep.
The arpeggiated guitar playing is what you described it as.
Indeed.
Which is beautiful to my mind.
Yes.
I like the tempo, the intensity. That's very appealing.
Indeed, it's great stuff. And so these guys are so generous to let us use their talents
week after week.
And so, hey, listeners, if you want to get a shout out, if you have an idea for an episode, you have a complaint, you have a praise, do not hesitate to write to us. You can get a hold of Dave at adnauseum.com. Don't forget that V.
Or if you want to get a hold of Jeff, you can write to Jeff at adnauseum.com. Don't forget the V. Maybe you want to complain about this episode. Maybe before we started, you felt a little Lactantius intolerant.
Very nice,
but now you're thinking, I could drink a whole glass of this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
By all means, let us know.
Right. Hey, if you want a T-shirt, you want a sticker, show your love for the classes, show the world that you are taking in the classics and keeping them down. Go to adnauseum.com. Check out our store, our Lurch with Merch section. We would love to see you out there in the wild, showing your love for the classics.
That's right. Wearing the Quae Nocent Docent T-shirt.
Yeah.
What Hertz teaches. If you want to study Greek and Latin with me, if you'd like to read the literature of Lactantius, the Divine Institutes, the De Aua Phoenicia. If you want to learn how to read Pico della Mirandola, then go to latinperdiem.com. Check out one of my courses that take you from
neophyte to erudite.
I've got Latin courses. I've got Greek courses. They are self-paced, expert, accessible, and I would say a good value. There may be better teachers out there. That's for you to judge. But I'm very confident there is not a better value in terms of the combination of high-level expertise and affordability. It's kind of like Hackett now that I think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Trying for that sweet spot.
And I want to call attention for our audiences that if you've listened to previous episodes, all of your offerings are now kind of under one umbrella, right?
That's correct.
One-stop shop.
That's right.
LatinPerDiem.com.
That's correct. And listeners, you might know that LatinPerDiem.com recently released something called Calvin's Latin Bible.
Oh, yeah.
This is an app version. It's on Android and on the Apple Store. You're an Apple guy, right, Jeff?
I'm an Apple guy, right?
You're very Apple-y.
I'm very Apple-y.
Yeah, you can go to the App Store and you can download for free the Psalms as translated by Calvin into Latin, the Psalms, and it includes audio recording, me reading the Psalms in Latin. There are Makra, that is long marks over all the text. It's fully searchable. Mm-hmm. This is a free and high quality way I would suggest to improve your knowledge of the Latin language.
Fantastic. This is brand new.
Brand new, hot off the presses.
Fantastic.
Maybe someday we'll do maybe a gurgle about it, just a little short episode.
Fantastic.
Explaining it to the listeners.
Yeah. And next week,
Jeff.
as we've been saying throughout the episode, we are going to dig into the various works of Lactantius and look at the man on the page.
That's correct.
Yep.
And his milky eloquence.
That's right.
Maybe someone's thinking, wait a minute, guys. I want to win that free ratio 4.
Yes, can't forget this.
What should they do, Jeff?
They should write to you, Dave at adnauseum.com. Don't forget that V. And this is the secret code word. It is quatuor.
What?
Quatuor is the Latin word for the number 4.
How do we spell it, Dr. Winkle?
Quattuor.
So if they
if
they send us that word, will they be entered into a drawing?
Yes, they'll be entered in drawing to get a brand new ratio 4 for your home or for your office. And we're doing the drawing in next month,
March 26th.
March 26th.
It's going to be shipped to their door, the lucky winner. the more entries we receive, the less chances that any particular individual will win.
That's right.
It's like the Powerball, so send them in.
Send them in. Yes, don't hesitate. And Dave, I believe you have our gustatory parting shot, yes?
Yes, I do. This is from the inimitable, she cannot be imitated, Sophia Loren.
Ah, yes.
The Italian actress, who I understand is still alive.
Yes.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
And what a lovely woman. So here's what she says. Sophia Loren, spaghetti can be eaten most successfully if you inhale it like a vacuum cleaner.
I agree, Sophia. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.